Hi again, F.F. Bruce, The Real Jesus. Chapter 3, Jesus, the historical setting. The background. Jesus was born in Bethlehem of Judea in the days of Herod the king, says Matthew the evangelist, thus indicating the place and time of Jesus' birth. Only two of the New Testament writers give us any details of the birth of Jesus. Matthew is one, and Luke is the other. Both of them say that he was born in Bethlehem, although they know, in common with other evangelists, that Jesus was brought up in Nazareth, a town in Galilee, and was called Jesus of Nazareth. But Matthew and Luke are independent of each other in their birth narratives. Matthew connects Jesus' birth in Bethlehem with an Old Testament oracle predicting that the ruler of Israel would come from there, as King David had come over 1,000 years before. That's Micah 5:2, by the way. Luke, for his part, explains that at that time a census was being held, which required each householder or head of the family to be registered at the place to which his family belonged. And Joseph, for that reason, had to go and register at Bethlehem. He took his wife Mary with him, and while they were in Bethlehem, her firstborn child, Jesus, was born. Luke also implies that Jesus was born in the reign of Herod. At least he introduces his account of the conception of birth of John the Baptist, who he says was 6 months older than Jesus, with the words, "in the days of Herod, king of Judea." That's Luke 1:5. If Jesus was born in the reign of Herod, it must have been right at the end of his reign. Herod ruled as king of the Jews from 37 to 4 BC, and Luke says later on that, in the 15th year of the Emperor Tiberius, meaning probably the year AD 27 or 28, Jesus was about 30 years of age. But who was this Herod, and how did he become king of the Jews? The Jews once had a native dynasty of kings founded by David before 1000 BC. It lasted for over 400 years, but then it was brought to an end by the Babylonians, who incorporated Judea into their empire and deported many of its inhabitants in 587 BC. But a couple of generations later, the Babylonians were defeated by the Persians under Cyrus. Cyrus, being a statesman as well as a military genius, realized the wisdom of allowing displaced persons here and there throughout his empire to return home, if they so wished. Several thousand Jewish exiles went back to Judea, where they rebuilt their temple in Jerusalem and enjoyed religious freedom. There was no question of granting them political independence. They remained under Persian control for just over 200 years, when the Persian Empire was overthrown in its turn by Alexander the Great at the head of an army of Macedonians and Greeks. Judea fell into Alexander's hands in 332 BC and was governed by him and his successors for 190 years. During those years, the Jews flourished, not only in Judea, but in other parts of the Greco-Macedonian Empire, notably in the great Egyptian city of Alexandria, founded by Alexander and named after himself in 331 BC. They enjoyed the amenities of Greek civilization and continued to practice their ancestral worship without hindrance. The day came, however, when one of Alexander's successors, Antiochus IV, commonly called Antiochus Epiphanes, decided to abolish the Jews' ancestral worship, or at least to assimilate it so thoroughly to a Greek cult that it would lose its distinctiveness. His chief motive was the safeguarding of the security of his kingdom. He was wrongly persuaded by unwise advisers that his action against the Jewish religion would strengthen his position in face of external dangers. For 3 years, from 167 to 164 BC, the Jerusalem temple was given over to the worship of a Greek divinity, stigmatized by the Jews as the abomination of desolation. The Jews had been docile subjects of their Persian and Greco-Macedonian overlords so long as their religious freedom was unimpaired. But the action of Antiochus stirred up a spirit of resentment which found an outlet in armed rebellion. Judas Maccabaeus, a gifted guerrilla leader, won a succession of victories against armies much larger and better equipped than his own following, and at the end of 164 BC was able to regain religious freedom for his people and restore the temple to its proper purpose. The anniversary of the dedication of the purified temple became a national festival among the Jews. It is mentioned in John 10:22, where Jesus is said to have been at the feast of the dedication at Jerusalem during the last winter of his life. Many pious Jews would have been content with the regaining of religious freedom, but Judas Maccabaeus and his brothers continued their campaign in hope of securing political independence. This hope was realized in 142 BC, when Judea became an independent state under Simon, the last survivor of Judas's brothers. Simon, followed by his heirs and successors, was not only civil and military leader, but high priest as well. And he and his family, the Hasmonaean family, were of priestly descent, but did not belong to the house of Zadok, which had held the chief priestly office in Jerusalem, apart from the interruption caused by the Babylonian exile, all the way from the time of Solomon building the first temple there until Antiochus IV deposed the last Zadokite High Priest, and that was a period, by the way, of about 800 years. Various aspects of the Hasmonean dynasty's policy, and especially its assumption of the high priesthood, incurred the disapproval of pious groups among the Jews. One group found their rule so intolerable that it withdrew from public life and settled in the Judean wilderness of Qumran and possibly other centers. This group belonged to the nonconformist tradition of the Essenes. Another group, the party of the Pharisees, did not withdraw from public life, but remained as the predominant opposition to the Hasmonaeans for most of the time that they were in power. Over against them, the Hasmonaeans enjoyed the support of another party called the Sadducees. Hasmonaeans ruled as an independent Judea for nearly 80 years, from 142 to 63 BC. During those years, the power of the Romans was steadily increasing in Western Asia. Judea would soon have become subservient to the Romans in any case, but an opportunity was given to them to establish their power there when a quarrel broke out between two Hasmonean princes, and one of them invited the Romans to intervene on his side. The Roman occupation of Judea in 63 BC brought Hasmonean sovereignty to an end. Judea proved a difficult province for the Romans to administer, and at last they decided to rule it through a Jewish king, Herod by name, a member of an influential family which had recently made itself very useful to Rome. Herod was not a popular ruler. He did not belong to any of the royal families of Israel, whether Davidic or Hasmonean, being in fact the descendant of Edomites, that is, Idumeans, who had been forcibly converted to Judaism a few generations earlier. But he ruled his kingdom effectively in Rome's interests for 33 years. In his will, he divided his kingdom among 3 of his sons, but his will had to be confirmed by Augustus, the Roman emperor, before it could take effect. One son, Archelaus, became ruler of Judea and Samaria. Another, Herod Antipas, was given Galilee and Perea, that is, the Transjordan, and a third, Philip, inherited territory east and north of the Lake of Galilee, where he built a new capital for himself at Caesarea Philippi, near one of the sources of the Jordan. All 3 of these sons of Herod are mentioned in the Gospels. 2 of them, Herod Antipas and Philip, were still governing their tetrarchies during the ministry of Jesus, 30 years and more after they were installed in office. But Archelaus proved to be so oppressive a ruler that after 9 years his subjects petitioned Augustus to remove him and govern Judea directly through a lieutenant of his own. In AD 6, then, Judea became a Roman province, administered on the emperor's behalf by an official, first called a prefect, and later a procurator. Next time we'll look at the Jews of Palestine in Jesus' day. I'll put in a link to a video we did in our Daniel playlist. Daniel and Jeremiah were true prophets. Their numbers, the 70 years of Jeremiah and the 70 weeks of Daniel, were fulfilled to the letter, those predictions. So why are the Watchtower's predictions not being fulfilled if they serve the same God as Jeremiah and Daniel? That's part of our Daniel playlist, which is now, I think, up to close to 100 videos. And the first 30 or so are just taking you through the book of Daniel, using it really to undermine several key Watchtower teachings, including their teaching not only on prophecy but on the kingdom of God, and their teaching of neutrality. So that course in Daniel, as it were, sets up with the question, was Daniel one of Jehovah's Witnesses? So we'll put in a link to the specific discussion of the 70 weeks prophecy in Daniel chapter 9. Plus I'll put the Daniel playlist on your screen. See you soon.